Cristina Lynch. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cristina, tell me about the early days. I know you grew up with a strong Mexican influence, and what was the moment when you realized you wanted to build Mi Golondrina?
Gosh, well, I think it does go way back. So my mother is Mexican. My father was born in Texas, but my mother has always had a very, very strong love of Mexican art and has been collecting art from Mexico since she was 18 years old. She was born in Torreon, and I just kind of grew up around that. I grew up seeing that, was able to meet artisans and artists and hear their stories, which I really loved, but I didn't realize how much it was truly influencing me and impacting me. And then I actually went to school in New York. I went to NYU. I double majored in theater and economics, which is kind of a funny major,
It is.
or
I've
double
never heard of
major.
that combo.
It was fun because, I mean, basically, I did theater as on the side when I was in high school, and I wanted to go to NYU, and I thought it was a great way to go there and kind of become immersed in the city. And then also, I really wanted to double major in business, but you can't because theater takes so much time. I chose economics. They don't let you double major in theater and business, or at least they didn't at the time. Um, and then yes, while I was there, I had so many different interests, but I would say by my junior year, I realized kind of how much I really appreciated fashion. So I started looking kind of at the fashion landscape, started looking at fashion internships. Um, One of my first internships was with a designer named Narciso Rodriguez. I had a sales fashion consulting internship with a company called Esterice. And then finally, my first job was at Oscar de la Renta. And that, I think, is when I really decided that this was what I wanted to do. So there's just so much beauty there. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous clothing brand. But when I was there, we started to learn about how everything was made and the different embroideries. And it really just kind of triggered something in my mind where I remembered all of the embroideries that I had seen growing up. And my thought was that, oh my gosh, the embroideries that I grew up seeing are stunning. And I'd love to kind of bring those more to the luxury landscape.
What was your role at Oscar de la Renta?
So I worked for the sales team. I when I first joined, my boss was Carl Mon. She was amazing, and it was a small team. So basically, we did wholesale for the U.S. and then helped with sales internationally. So we would go to market in Paris and then do market in New York. And it was really, really just such an incredible experience. I think one of the things I really learned is at the time, I don't know the corporate structure now, but it wasn't that large of a team. And to me, Oscar de la Renta is just this incredible name. And to see that it was just this like great kind of, in my mind, smaller team for what they were doing, I think made it exciting because you were able to connect to so much. And Oscar Lorenta, the designer, was actually alive while I was there, and so you could see him. He was still very involved, um, and so yeah, it was a really neat experience. And when I first went into fashion, kind of being an econ major and just thinking about the fashion landscape, I really thought the buying route was like what I needed to do. I was like, oh, I need to be a buyer, and that was what seemed like I don't know the best route. And also, I was looking at the executive development program at Neiman Marcus. And I remember one of my dad's best friends. I was talking to him and I was like, well, I think I'm looking at this role in sales. And at the time, I just wasn't as proud of it. I didn't understand it. And he said, that's great. That's, the one thing you don't learn in school, and it is the most important thing for you to know. And I completely agree. I'm so glad I learned about sales, especially doing what I do now.
Yeah, so looking at your NYU stage and economics double major and going into a sales role at Oscar de la Renta, it seems like you kind of follow the economics path a little bit more just by kind of looking at that. But then kind of understanding about the buyer's journey, understanding the business side of, the fashion business. then like how did we transition to Mi Golondrina then? So there's a personal story behind it, right? With the swallows at your grandfather's ranch,
Yeah.
and what is that connection to your heritage? Kind of how did it come about, and how did you make that connection to the experiences that you had at Oscar de la Renta?
Yeah, I think it's evolved so much. I started the business when I was 23, 24. And I think for me, what happened is I went to a store called ABC Home and I saw so many gorgeous embroideries. And a lot of them were French and Italian. And I just wasn't at the time seeing a lot that represented even just Latin America in general. And it really surprised me. And my mom in Mexico on the ends of our beds used to put these embroideries from southern Mexico that have these huge flowers. They're from Tehuantepec. I mean, they could literally be framed. They're so beautiful. And so I just kept thinking, gosh, these are really gorgeous embroideries, and I think they should be brought to the luxury landscape. So when I was working in New York, I called my brother and kind of had this very vague idea of what I wanted to start, but it really was about bringing embroidery more into the home, actually, from a luxury lens. And at the time, my brother said, I think you should start it. I think you should move home. I had been in New York for a little bit, so I decided to move home. I moved in with my parents, and I basically just started reading all of these books. My mom had books on award-winning artisans, and I didn't realize that I already kind of had an education and that like a smaller floral embroidery was from San Antonino Castillo Velasco, which is in Oaxaca. I knew different styles of embroidery. And because at first I was thinking about home, a good friend of mine, he's actually my half brother, stepbrother, is the CEO of Peacock Alley, this linens business. And so I kind of pitched the idea to him and just created a presentation, brought in some embroideries that I had found, and said, what do you think of this bedding line with hand embroidery from Mexico? And he was so incredible. He helped me start it. And as we were kind of going and getting started, and basically we like collaborated on these linens and these pillows and everything, I was actually taking dresses apart that I had found at the markets to make these pillows. And so I had these beautiful, beautiful sleeveless dresses. And so I turned them into blouses and dresses. And yeah, and so for our launch party, I had all these beds dressed with beautiful embroideries. And I'd say it was about a year of us kind of working on everything. But I had all these sleeveless dresses, so I decided to turn them into finished, well-made dresses. And I remember I talked to my mom about it. I was like, I really want them to feel luxe and so nice. And she had this great idea to do a ribbon lining inside the sleeve. And so it was really great because I think one of the things I learned from just fashion and being kind of in the fashion industry was the importance of kind of creating a lifestyle or a feeling in a room. I wanted it to feel full and like just so rich with Mexico. So we had ribbons everywhere and really had this wonderful party. And there was just this one rack of the tops and dresses and then lots of beds with all the pillows. And I started with the small floral embroidery from San Antonino and was just completely blown away by how much people loved them. I mean, I think we had 40 dresses, which isn't very much, but they sold out immediately. People were just instantly drawn to them. And at the time, my whole idea was that I was going to sell a handful and then I would put them online. And I had modeled them myself. I was ready to upload them on Shopify and they sold out. So I think that immediately made me realize that clothing was the right route. And I was so excited because I've always loved clothing. So, but the initial like trip and to figure out kind of all the embroidery is such an important part because basically I read about all these different women and different embroideries and just decided to go to Mexico and started to meet with different incredible women. And there was one woman, Roberta, who was just so fabulous and so excited for this concept. You know, I told her, I think I'd like to do some pillows and I think I want embroidery on them. And there were some people that I had spoken to about this idea, and they kind of looked at me like I was crazy and like, was I really going to do this? Should they trust me? And she just had just such an open heart and was just so excited to partner on this. And so, yeah, we started with those embroideries and then pivoted to clothing.
So interesting. You say that you had a vague idea at the time, but it seems like you probably had that vague idea a long time ago. I read that you're writing about starting a Mexican lifestyle company in your journals at the age of 15. So that probably has been marinating in the
Yeah.
background for years and years and years. And just even when you were ready to take this step, kind of still not super clear, but
Hmm.
the whole embroidery thing kind of reminds me of brands starting, like even health and wellness and supplements brands. They start with like a single ingredient, like they say, all right, let's pick up turmeric, and then use
Yes.
turmeric, and then build a bunch of things around turmeric
Hmm.
gummies, turmeric this. So in your case, embroidery is your single ingredient, which
Yes.
you're thinking that you're gonna maybe do pillows with it, but then turn it into dresses.
Yes.
And that's pretty incredible. So you said that you sold out of the 40, set up a Shopify. So I kind of want to understand, how did you sell out of 40? How did you have an email list? How did you get your first 100, first 500 people, customers or leads? How did you build that up in the beginning?
Yeah, I think starting a business in Dallas is it's really a great city to start a business because it's a very welcoming community, and I think people really like to support local. I grew up here, so I have a lot of friends and just a great supportive community. So I started there, and my mom was so smart because when I was getting started, and thinking through kind of who to invite and what to do, she said, You just need to make sure your invitation looks really, really special. I try to make it look almost like a wedding invitation so that people open it and they come. And I thought that was so smart. And we did it in a very budget conscious way, but just mailed it out to everybody I could and texted people, just had so many friends come. So the initial people that shopped were really friends, family friends, or, cousins. I mean, there was just so many kind of, yeah, this just network I had just grown from growing up here. And, I remember somebody saying like, your customers aren't your friend, you're not going to have customers who are friends. And it's really not true for Mi Golondrina. We have a really, really strong community, and a lot of my friends are our customers, and a lot of our customers have become my friends. It's really this tight knit community, and I think part of that is because when I first started selling, I actually would do a lot of pop ups. I would load up my parents' Suburban with a lot of dresses and go from house to house selling dresses and just create relationships with people. And I would do pop ups in people's homes, pop ups in stores, and um, I think that's just kind of how the word of mouth really grew. Um, I think social media is an incredible tool, and we used Instagram from day one. I have a picture from when we first started, but I think word of mouth has honestly been almost stronger for us from the customer standpoint.
Why do you think it was stronger for you?
I just think that in the beginning, Instagram was great, but it was really small. So there's no way. I think that our sales were really coming more from the in person sales and people telling friends and friends and friends. And what's so nice is that our embroidered pieces really did stand out. They felt unique. So if somebody was wearing our piece, they would, in the grocery store, they would tell their friend and they would go buy it. And Dallas is one of those places where you see people in the grocery store, you see people in the carpool line, and you actually talk to them. And so I really do think that's the way sales really started for us.
I'd love to understand a little bit more about the production process. So there's the embroidery piece, which is what the artisans do, right? That's kind of like the art part of it.
Yeah.
And then maybe just like the dresses probably get made somewhere else, I imagine. I read that you've built relationships with over 850 artisans across Mexico. That seems like a lot of people. Like, one, how did you build up a network like that? And
Hmm.
two, how does that tie in with the non-embroidery parts of the product?
Absolutely. No, that's such a good question. So, really, whenever I think about this business, when I first started, it really was more that I was just so in love with Mexico and had a lot of pride, and I wanted to show off that part of Mexico in a luxury lens. And I was young and really like, I didn't fully appreciate what goes into all of this embroidery. So, as I started to meet Roberta and meet more artisans she worked with, I think when we first started, we were working with 25 women, then they became 50. And um, when I was a couple years in, one of the women who had been embroidering for us told us that she was now able to send one of her children to school. And we were so low volume that that just completely blew me away. And I think that that's when the business really completely changed for me, to be honest. I like fashion. I think it's really great. I don't think this company is about fashion at all. It's really an artisan business model that supports the way artisans work, and fashion is more the vehicle to support them, if that makes sense. So because we work with artisans, everything we do is direct to customer. So like there are a lot of things that we do that I think are very different from your normal fashion business. I think we're the slowest form of fashion out there. Some of our dresses can take up to a month or 6 months to make. And so we have to constantly be thinking about different lead times. And we think a lot about basically in any given style, how many units will be made. So a lot of times we'll make a style and it will only have 10 units behind it or 40 units behind it. And so I think that, you know, thankfully through social media, we've gained a great following. We have a little over 100,000 followers. So I think sometimes we're perceived to be larger in volume than we are, when actually like everything truly is so handmade. So it's difficult actually to like, you can't mass produce this, and I don't want it to be mass produced. So the way that we work right now is we launch typically around two collections per month, and they're limited in volume. So we do have collections, and not always, but we do have collections that will sell out in the first hour, and people look forward to them, and it'll all sell, and that's great. And then we have collections that sell, over time. It kind of depends on what we're selling and how much inventory we want to put behind it. But the artisans that we work with, truly what they do is art because they're all embroidering. They're all, I would say 99% women. They all embroider in their homes and they embroider on their own time schedule. So, yes, there are timelines, but those timelines are really built on history. So, when I first started Mi Golondrina, I would ask, like, how long do you think this dress will take to make? And a lot of the women that I was working with were very eager, very excited about this business that they would say, oh, it'll take me 2 weeks. And 2 weeks would go by and no dresses, and which was fine because at the time I wasn't selling. Well, I was selling to Stanley Korshak, so I must have been a little nervous about that. But I had one wholesale partner, and otherwise it was okay. Um, and then slowly, do you think 3 weeks? No. And so 2 months. Okay, great. And so I would slowly kind of build an artisan calendar of like, okay, this dress typically takes this long, and then buffer that, and then kind of build our schedule on that. And so we work with artisans in different communities. Some of the communities, I can name a few of them, like San Antonino Castillo Velasco is in Oaxaca, Aguacatenango is in Chiapas, Huixtan is in Chiapas. So all of these communities have basically groups of women that we work with. And the groups range from like 30 to 40 women. And within a group, you have a leader. And a lot of times the leader is the one who's in charge of making sure that all the threads are right, that really there are no, like that everything's like perfect basically. And they're also the ones, a lot of our pieces are hand drawn before they're hand embroidered. So a lot of times the artisan leader is the one that will draw it before it's then given to all the people in their group. So yeah, so I feel like the way we grew, honestly, is because we are good partners and um, again, word of mouth. So we have groups that we'll start with and they'll quickly tell their cousins and their friends that this is great and that's a thing that they can do in their home while they're taking care of their kids. Or, one of the artisans we work with, Ellie, um, her family sells flowers. So she'll help with that. But she also has a son. And so she can embroider in the time that works for her.
I feel like your business is in such an interesting place right now in the age of AI. It's my belief that going forward, craftsmanship or craftspersonship, or is going to be valued more and more as kind of people realize a lot of things can be made by AI, and the things that cannot be made by AI will just gain value. I feel like,
Yeah.
just imperfections and authenticity and real person putting their time into it. So, I think it's almost like your business might kind of fall into this new movement I've been reading about, the slow movement, the slow living, slow
Uh-huh.
production. I don't know if you've been kind of seeing that.
Yes, I've seen a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's almost like slowing down on purpose and just putting more value into things that are in limited quantity and slow and not necessarily just fast and a lot in quantity.
Hmm.
So, going back to the entrepreneurship part of it, to start a business like I'm an immigrant. There's just a lot of immigrants who live in the U.S. And when you're an immigrant in the country, you hear, oh, like, how do I kind of go back to my roots and kind of maybe build a business that builds a bridge with my home country or something like that. Maybe I can start a business that kind of, similar along the lines that, what you kind of did, but maybe, something different. If somebody wants to start something like that, just what are some of the realities in terms of like what kind of money do you have to put down to kind of make 40 dresses, or, you just kind of set expectations with people, what's required to get something like this started?
Yeah. I think that I need to read this book again, but I read a book called Just Start. And because at the time I was dating somebody who was going to Babson. And so he had to read that before he went to school. And so I was like, I want to read that. That sounds cool. And one of the things it said was kind of choose a certain amount of money that you're okay losing and just go. Um, and I started with around $20,000, which was a very big deal to me. I was in my 20s, and that was something that I was fortunate to have. I still fully own the business and continue
Oh,
to
wow.
bootstrap it. Um, I think that I think it just depends on how fast you want to grow too. I was okay with slow growth, although we did grow kind of fast, especially in the initial years. But I think that would be my biggest piece of advice is that I think that so many people overthink. Um, and while I do think a business plan is great, yeah, I think you should just kind of start ideating and making little samples. I always tell people if they want to do something, just start small, see what it starts to look like. Don't make it so big that you're scared of it. I think people can kind of psych themselves out. And then as far as connecting with another country, I think it's a really beautiful thing. I was born in Dallas and grew up in a very Mexican home, meaning, we spoke Spanish. We always ate Mexican food. There were telenovelas on in the house. So I would say that I was raised more like Tex-Mex because my father was Texan. But I've learned so much kind of going back, and I'm constantly learning from the women we work with in Mexico. They are so incredibly inspiring. Um, the artisans we work with are mothers. And when I was young, I knew I always wanted a family, but I didn't really know what that meant or what that looked like. And just watching them work, but also take such good care of their children and do that within community, is probably the reason I have three children. I just, and I think there's a lot of warmth to Mexico. Mexico is a very family centric country. Family's like everything, and so I don't know, witnessing that and being closer to that, I think has made me so much stronger. So I would tell anybody that's wanting to get back to their roots to do it, because it has just impacted me in the most beautiful way.
Let's talk about marketing a little bit. What was working in the early days for marketing, and what's working these days?
Oh, wow. I think it's changed so much. We've used social media a lot, Instagram mostly. And as I said, when I started, I was bootstrapping a lot. So I was always the model. I remember kind of setting up a tripod, and getting something where I could click it and jump and take pictures of myself. And then I remember on Instagram kind of trying to get different angles of the dresses and cutting my head out, and a lot of smoke and mirrors, trying to look as elevated as possible with as low of a budget as possible. Um, and I think now it's so much about people want what's authentic. They want to connect. I really felt that during COVID. I remember I was so nervous and needed to continue to connect with our customers. So I would set up a little tripod in my bedroom and just kind of talk to our customers about different things, about different styles. But I feel like that's when it started to become a little more, um, yeah, just like a little more less posed, more natural, more connecting. And I enjoy that. I think that's really great. I do think for a luxury brand, you want to make sure that you continue to create content that feels elevated, that feels aspirational. So we really try to do both. I like to have that like beautiful dress just really shine and just look so gorgeous. And honestly, I love marketing. I love gorgeous content. And now we're able to do things like that. We still have to be very budget aware. But I do think we're able to have a little more fun than we were day one. And then there still is that very personal part. Like I even have my personal Instagram where I talk to customers. Um, and then we have the Mi Golondrina one, and then we'll do talking videos. So I think our marketing is a lot about beautiful content, but also continuing to create community and connecting with our customers, listening to them, and yeah.
Christina, if you wanted to start a new business from scratch in any category, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I don't think I'd do anything else because I think I'd be doing it. Um, I do think it's incredible to not have to deal with inventory. There's so many neat platforms that support and promote great businesses, or people. And I think if there's a way to do it where you don't have to own inventory, I think that that is fabulous. So it's something that I have thought about, especially in this day and age. I mean, you see so many influencers who are able to support businesses in a very impactful way. Um, but at the same time, they don't have to worry about inventory. And I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. For the creator influencers who are listening and watching, what do you look for when you're collaborating with them?
I really, I really like collaborating with people who already like and know the brand. I think that's so important. It's got to come from a real place. Starting in Dallas was so great just because Reward Style was started here by Amber Venz, and so there are a lot of influencers here, and so a lot of my friends naturally supported the brand. And I think that has helped us so much just because it comes from a real place. I think sometimes when you see influencers or creators talking about a brand, you can tell they just are getting paid, which they should be paid. But you can tell they don't necessarily, maybe it doesn't necessarily fit their style. Um, I think a customer always feels that. And the influencer world is growing, right? And so there are more and more people. So I think it is so important now to really feel authentic.
Yeah. Christina, final two-part question. What are the top two problems giving you a headache right now, and top two priorities for the year that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I always say that, gosh, every day we have a few problems. That's just running a startup. Um, I would say we are really focusing on, like, one of our problems is just making sure that production is top notch and really checking all of our skills when it comes to sewing and that everything's finished perfectly. So something that we're focusing on. And then I would say another thing is just continuing to, I would say another one is like continuing to create such beautiful things, but also making sure that our customers understand where it comes from. I think that's a big focus, is that kind of what I was saying earlier, is that I think our customers start to see that it's a larger brand, but I want to make sure they fully connect with the person who's making it and know that it is kind of small and small batch. So I would say that's another thing that I'm focusing on. It is a problem, I guess. And then as far as things that I'm focusing on next year, we just did our photo shoot for our collection leading up to Valentine's Day. It's called Mil Besos, and it's awesome. I'm so excited. It's so happy. And we talk to the artisans we work with about love and what love means to them. And it's really just such a beautiful thing that I can't wait to share. And then another one is that we're working with an influencer, the Nat Note, on a collaboration this spring that'll be great.
Cristina Lynch, thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thank you so much for having me.